So now I'm happy to introduce our main speaker for the day, our wonderful district attorney of the city of Memphis, and also a parishioner of St. Louis, Amy Weirich.
Thank you so much. This is such a treat to get to come and speak to the famous St. Leo's lunch, and it also gave me an opportunity to sneak over to the cafeteria and be with our sixth grader for a minute and celebrate cupcakes with the sixth graders for his birthday, which was in December. So people often ask me, how do I do it, be the DA of Shelby County, and I have a wonderful husband and 4 usually wonderful children. Well, I do it, but I don't always do it very well, and today was one of those examples of one of my shortcomings. Thank you for letting me come and talk about this very important topic. Your DA's office touches about 200,000 cases every year. That's misdemeanors, that's felonies, that's everybody that has too much to drink on Beale Street and is charged with public intoxication and put in jail just for a couple of hours to dry out, on up to murder and everything in between. We indict, the Shelby County Grand Jury indicts about 11,000 cases every year, and I sign every one of those indictments personally and with a black pen. And so I often do that work at home and on the weekends, the signing. And I was signing them this weekend, and one particular indictment jumped out at me because it was for a trafficking case. And I just want to read to you, before I go through some of these facts and figures, I want to read to you how a case like this happens in our very own backyard, because I think I've been honored to serve as your DA since 2011, and when I first took office and I would go around and talk about human trafficking, audiences often thought she's talking about China and New Zealand and countries far, far away. Surely we don't have human trafficking in Shelby County. Well, we do. Let me read to you from this probable cause report from the Memphis Police Department. On October 24th, 2017, the police department received a complaint of forcible rape at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital. The victim, who was 16 years old, ran away from home. She gave a signed and typed statement advising that after running away, she had been forced against her will to prostitute for money from the beginning of October until the middle of October, until she was able to escape. The victim advised that she was held at a house. I won't disclose the address, but suffice it to say it's here in the city of Memphis. The defendant took the victim's cell phone and posted online ads advertising the victim as a prostitute for sex. Once a customer would respond to the ads, the defendant would pretend to be the victim, negotiate the amount for sex, and then he would arrange for the deal. The defendant, Williams, would then have relatives of his watch out for the victim in the park where she was taken to perform these sex acts on men. The victim would then be forced to give the defendant the proceeds from these encounters. The victim stated that she went on a total of 4 dates and was paid over $300 for 2 of those dates. The victim also reported that while being held at the house, she was forced by the defendant to perform sex on him. The victim positively identified the defendant from a photo lineup as the person being responsible for doing this to her and taking her money. And it goes on to include some of the necessary language that we need in court to prosecute these cases. But that is one of, unfortunately, far too many cases that we see in Memphis and Shelby County. And oftentimes the pattern is the same. The victim is a throwaway. The victim is a young girl, a young boy who has no one in their life to care for them. Or they have people who are caring for them, who are abusing them. And so they escape one hell and they find themselves in an unspeakable hell. And these perpetrators, these monsters, are trained and attuned to identify these very, very vulnerable young people in our community. Shortly after I became the district attorney, the legislature decriminalized prostitution for juveniles. What does that mean? It means before 2012, if a 16-year-old was picked up for prostitution, they were charged and prosecuted for that crime as a juvenile. It took us a little bit of time to figure out they're victims. They're victims, and we as a community, as a society, need to treat them as victims. We now do the same in our office with adults. Any adult that is arrested for prostitution, while it is still a crime under the state of Tennessee, under the laws, we give those women and men an opportunity to attend a class and to get out of that lifestyle. Because if you're a victim when you're 17, it doesn't make any sense to call you a defendant when you turn 18. These are some national statistics. Since 2007, the National Human Trafficking Hotline has received reports of close to 15,000 sex trafficking cases inside of the United States. There was a study done by our very own Tennessee Bureau of Investigation a couple of years ago when they looked around and tried to improve and increase the training that is provided for law enforcement officers across the country. And the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation took the map of the state of Tennessee and looked at where the concentration of the most trafficking cases were. And ironically, it wasn't right here in beautiful Memphis, and it wasn't in our state's capital. It was in little bitty old Lake County. Tiny little county up the road, and all of you bird lovers and eagle lovers that have been to Reelfoot have been in Lake County. Lake County, there's a very, very high level of poverty. And what they found was a very, very high level of stepfathers, fathers, uncles, grandfathers, brothers selling their sisters, their cousins, their daughters, their best friends online for other men to buy and come have sex with. Some of you may recall this. It is a night that I will not forget, no matter how long I am privileged enough to serve as your district attorney. I got a call from the director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation probably in the middle of 2016, and he said, we want to do an undercover sting operation in your city focusing on human trafficking. And I said, great, whatever my office can do to help you, and whatever our team of special victims prosecutors can do to help. So they worked for many, many months planning and executing this. It took place in a hotel near a private school in our city, and what was witnessed by myself, your governor, the First Lady, senators and representatives and others in an undisclosed room watching closed circuit TV was, quite frankly, scenes that I will never forget. And I've been a prosecutor for 27 years, and I've seen things wished I never had. But these were men literally getting off of airplanes, landing at the Memphis International Airport, pulling their phones out, getting on Backpage. Thank God they were just shut down not too long ago by the federal government. But getting on Backpage and trying to find young women to have sex with at a nearby hotel. And this undercover sting operation had been posting these ads for days and days, laying the bait. They had TBI agents that they were using as undercover women who quite literally looked like they were 14. And unfortunately, many of the men who were looking for this type of activity specifically asked for 14-year-olds. It's a language that they use that would not mean anything to you. In the 3 days that the TBI was here set up doing this back and forth sting operation, you see the numbers there, 38 men and 4 women were arrested here. There were literally thousands and thousands and thousands of text messages sent back and forth between the undercover agents and the unsuspecting customers that were coming to the hotel and making the arrangements. Will you do these types of things? How much does it cost me? Where do I go when I get to the hotel? Those types of things, but all using a very unique language that wouldn't mean anything unless you were in that industry. Among the individuals that were caught up in this sting, the head of MATA, as many of you recall, they did this operation, TBI did this operation across the state, and in other jurisdictions they arrested pastors and leaders of business communities, and this was just what our net gathered up that day. The head of MATA, a law student, a medical professional, and an engineer, just to name a few. The silver lining, the good news, and I always feel like I'm the angel of death and doom whenever I speak to groups about crime and what's going on. Many of you know the Haga family, and Rachel Haga, who married into that wonderful family, runs a group in town called Restore Corps. And what Rachel and her team do day in and day out is get these women, these men out of this lifestyle. So while we had TBI and some of the best law enforcement agents in the country there, tough as nails and can take down serial killers with one hand, we also had the softer side, and that was important to the director of TBI and to myself as we planned and executed this, that if we have young girls that happen to show up because they the news of this spread like wildfire. Not the news that it was an undercover operation, but the news that there was a lot of business going on at this particular hotel. And if you've got a body to sell, this is the place to bring it. And so pimps would bring their 16-year-olds to that hotel location and drop them off and order them to get some business and come back with money. We were able to get some of those young girls and get them out of that lifestyle because of Rachel Haga and the work that she does day in and day out helping these women. She also helps us with our prostitution diversion program. International Labor Organization estimates that 4.5 million people worldwide are trapped in forced sexual exploitation. A child is bought or sold for sex every 2 minutes in the United States. That may have been all I needed to show you or say to you, was that right there. Within your DA's office, we have some of the best prosecutors in the country, our Special Victims Unit team of prosecutors who do nothing all day, every day, but deal with this. They deal with child abuse, physical and sexual. They deal with every rape case in Shelby County, and they deal with every case of elder abuse in Shelby County. And every day, one of that team reports to the Child Advocacy Center, and many of you are familiar with the great work that goes on at our Child Advocacy Center here in town. That is a place down on Poplar. It used to be the old Four Flames. That is where children go who have been the victims of crime like this, sexual crime and physical abuse. It's where they go to get their childhood back and to begin the process of healing. And every day that team, prosecutors, somebody from the DCS, the Department of Children's Services, somebody from the Memphis Police Department, and somebody from the Child Advocacy Center reviews every call that has come in over the last 24 hours for help, or any call of a reporting of suspicion of child abuse. Some of these calls, some of these files result in people being arrested right then and right there, like this young girl that was brought to Le Bonheur who had been raped. Some of those calls result in somebody just going out to that house and trying to figure out what's going on. But there's great work that goes on at the CAC, and they are wonderful partners to the work that goes on in the criminal justice system to make sure that these victims are getting the resources and the healing and the help that they need. We know that children who grow up exposed to adverse experiences, you've heard the science behind adverse childhood experiences. We know that those children are more likely to grow up and become the next generation of criminal defendants that my office has to prosecute, or the next generation of victims. And so anything and everything that we can do to wrap our arms around them as quickly as possible is imperative. Types of venues for sex trafficking, I've mentioned the local hotel, of course the online ads, escort services, residence-based commercial sex, and of course truck stops. Those are typically a hotbed for not only this type of activity, but drug activity and other nuisances in and around our community. Total cases reported in 2017, 110 of human trafficking. Victims over 600, hotline calls 370, calls since 2007, 2,095. This is very much underreported, very much underreported. Typically how these case files read, when I look at them, this has gone on, as in this case, for a couple of weeks. This is, quite frankly, a relatively short period of time. Often these victims are held hostage, held against their will, forced to do this for months, maybe years. And it is nothing but sheer fear that keeps them from getting help, from getting out, from leaving that lifestyle. And in many situations, it's not only the fear of what their abuser is going to do to them, but the threats that their abuser has made toward their family. And they've seen their abusers be violent. In many cases, they've seen their abusers kill people or come close to killing people, so that they know they have the actions to match the words. It typically starts with grooming. I often tell parents groups when I talk to them, you know, how can something like this happen? This little girl was away from her mom for days on end, and her mom went from Friday until Sunday before she ever tried to even reach out and find her young daughter, before she ever texted her. That's a conversation in and of itself for another day. But it typically starts with the grooming, and these abusers, these pimps, identify these young girls, these young boys who nobody is looking out for, who nobody cares about. and they begin buying them things, they begin taking them places. I can't tell you how many child abuse cases, how many child sex cases have started out the same way. This young man showed up in our life. He was a friend of a friend of a friend, and I'm a single mom, and I'm working 3 jobs, and he showed interest in my son, and he started taking him to church, and he started taking him to restaurants, and he started taking him to places that I can't afford to take him, and he became very close to us, and he was helping me take him here and there, and lo and behold, that's when it starts. So this is very much underreported, these figures. These are the ones we know about. This was one of the more gruesome ones to capture the headlines here in Shelby County. 2013, this monster, appropriately named T-Rex, would literally impregnate women so that he could continue his business to raise up another generation of girls that he could sell the bodies of and make money off of. Everything from keeping his victims in dog kennels. Many of his victims watched him seriously and physically abuse people who he wasn't happy with, who he wasn't pleased with, and so they knew that when he said, "If you leave me, I will find your mother and I will kill her," they knew that he would. They knew that he could. He was fortunately sentenced to 44 years in prison, and in the federal system, when they say 44 years, they mean it. In the state system, we're not that lucky. It's a lot of magic math that our Tennessee Department of Corrections engages in. It's why we partner every chance we can with our federal partners in the U.S. Attorney's Office. In fact, I'm leaving here and we'll head to the U.S. Attorney's Office for a press conference on the latest joint venture between our offices. But on sex trafficking, on child pornography, which is a huge growing industry in our community, right here in our backyard, we partner every chance we can with the federal U.S. Attorney's Office so we can make sure we get the most time. He tattooed his victims with his logo as his property on their bodies, and you can see there some of the victims were as young as 15, and the wonderful threat to prostitute somebody's 9-year-old daughter. Here's another one in Lakeland. You know, again, I hope what this spattering of geography highlights for you is that there is no boundary. This does not just happen in one part of the city. This does not just happen in a zip code that doesn't look anything like mine. This happens throughout the county to families with resources, to families without resources, to families whose kids go to private schools, to families whose kids go to public schools or don't go to school at all. Just like domestic violence, this knows no bounds. But this was the Super 8 in Lakeland. We were able to rescue a 19-year-old girl, managed to get to the 911 and call her mother for help. And both the man and the woman were arrested for the kidnapping and the false imprisonment. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimated that 1 in 6 endangered runaways reported to them were likely sex trafficking victims. 1 in 6 runaways. And here's another one of our poster children for we will find you and we'll make sure we remove you from society as long as we can. He was sentenced to life for sex trafficking of minors. Timothy Jones must make restitution to 2 of the victims. He recruited one from Memphis and forced her to perform numerous dates each day in Louisville and New Orleans. And the physical abuse is always a component of this. Whether they don't make enough money, whether they look at him the wrong way, there's usually no good reason for the beating that they suffer, but that is always part of it. And once again, for trying to lead and to control, they suffer the physical abuse. This was that same operation that came here to Memphis. They operated one here and in Nashville and in Knoxville and in Clarksville. More than a dozen men in jail after their 2-day crackdown, including a pastor and an Army lieutenant on prostitution-related charges. That is some good news. We typically, as a state, receive an A+ rating from the national organization that grades laws in states on human trafficking. We have very tough laws. The facts of the case that I read you when I started talking to you, it's an A felony and a B felony, which are the most serious. So for just one of these counts alone, this offender is looking at 15 to 60 years in prison, depending on his record and prior convictions. Because I think if we know anything, if there are any consistencies in this area as well as in just the general area of rape, These offenders don't just do this one time. There are always more than one victim. So anything and everything we can do to get them off the streets and locked up to reduce the number of the next victims is what we work hard on every day. Promoting the prostitution of a child is a Class A or B felony. And let me open it up now to questions, gripes, complaints, and suggestions on this topic or anything else. Everybody's depressed and just wants to go home for the rest of the day, right? I know. I have that great effect on crowds. Yes, sir, in the back. They've been on, I've been talking about them a lot lately. Yes, I will say that the city of Lakeland is outraged and has a zero tolerance for this type of behavior. So we are working with that location to see what we can do. You know, the big hammer that we swing when we have to against businesses that don't get the message is the nuisance petition, where we just go in and we just shut them down. We just say, look, we've tried everything we can. I don't like to shut down businesses in this community because it takes jobs from people. But if they leave me no recourse, sometimes that's the only choice we have. But we are working with them. But yeah, they've had a bad couple of months in the press. Yes, sir.
What percentage of the cases that you see are you able to run through the federal laws that are stricter penalties, as you mentioned, versus the state laws that were somewhat weaker? 50-50 or?
No, it's not 50-50. First of all, there has to be a federal nexus. We have to be able to show that this particular crime is also a violation of federal law. So in the case where I read to you about the pimp taking the victims across state lines, that would be a federal nexus. That doesn't always mean the U.S. Attorney's Office is going to take the case. But I will say our office has always had a great working relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So if they can take the case, and if the offender is going to get more time over there, they do. But it may be 15-20% of the cases that we see go federal at best. But we partner on a lot of different things. I've actually got 2 prosecutors that your tax dollars are paying for who don't come to work at 201 every day. They go to work every day at the U.S. Attorney's Office. And they help us identify cases where it might be a state case right now, but hey, wait a minute, let's see if we can take it federal. Yeah. So we do that in the area of not just trafficking, but also heroin. We've created a new heroin opioid task force between our 2 offices, and we've done it since 2001 on gun violence, gun crimes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How do you see so many heinous and vulgar and terrible things? How does your faith guide you through all that?
Oh wow, it's everything. I had this conversation many years ago with Monsignor MacArthur, because I know that as Christians and as Catholics particularly, we are called to see Christ in everyone we cross paths with every day. And I told him very bluntly, I said, that's very hard for me at 201 Poplar. It's just damn difficult. And he, of course, had a very profound and sage response that he was able to deliver, thanks to the Holy Spirit, that of what my job is and what my mission is, and that perhaps through our light and the light that we are supposed to be shining every day in what we do, whether we work at 201 Poplar or a luxurious office somewhere else, others should see that light in everything that we do. And that's what Christ is calling you to do. And the rest of it, you're not supposed to be worrying about their sins and their activity. It is very hard. But I don't think I could be standing here. I don't think I could do it without, and I'm a convert, so don't get me on my soapbox about Catholicism, because I could be here all day. But I truly know that I couldn't do it without my Catholic faith and without just, my routines in the morning and what I do to get through the day, and my statue of Mary on my desk that I yell at her from time to time, but she yells right back and we get through the day. Yeah, and you know what? I have yet to have a day where I was right and she was wrong. She's always right. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You identified a monster or two. In the forming of that monster, are they sane, and is it attributed to how they were formed mostly? Right? What's the key ingredients to making them a monster?
Yeah, it's, without looking at any of these offenders' history, I can tell you what it looks like. Because before I became the DA, I worked in the courts day in and day out. And for the largest part of my career in the DA's office, I worked with the worst of the worst, the repeat violent felony offenders who could do things to people that you couldn't even make up. And the history is always the same. They were abused physically, emotionally, one or the other, all of the above, and or they watched abuse. They watched mama's boyfriends in and out abusing her. They grew up in neighborhoods where people were abused. That was just the norm. That violence was and is the norm. I can't help but think that if somebody much smarter than I were to overlay this increase that we're seeing in these heinous crimes and the depravity of mind that we're seeing, well, the chief prosecutor of our special victims unit texted me late a few nights ago at the end of his rope, and he said, "I've just charged the 4th individual in the last month for raping a baby." Yeah, so when we start seeing things like that, you just can't help but wonder if you overlaid on this criminal activity the internet and the violence that our generation, my children and the children before them, have grown up exposed to, that is seen as the norm. Kids today see images that none of us would have seen growing up. Wouldn't have seen them. And we're giving them phones so they can access it all the time. You know, as great as it is to order a pair of shoes and get it sent to my front door in 24 hours, the internet's the devil. But you just have to wonder if that increase in the popularity and the accessibility of the violence and the depravity of mind, if that's all connected. My humble opinion is it is, but it all gets back to the home. It all gets back to...
And connected to that, because I know how much mentoring is a part of your office, another correlation possibly between lack of mentors and rise of crime, or you see the correlation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's throwaway kids. It's kids that nobody even cares if they go to school.
Right.
We will finish the school year, I'm quite sure, with close to 30,000 kids in the Shelby County school systems that miss 10% of the year or more unexcused. Nobody's looking out for them, except these monsters. They're looking for them.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you've informed us of a lot of information. You said it knows no bounds. What can we do as a community to be observant, to try to help people that may be a possible victim, or help notify your office of some situation?
Great question.
Make the situation better.
I mean, it all starts at home. So first and foremost, if you've got young kids at home and grandkids at home, talk to them about this. I mean, talk to them about this, because it knows no bounds. And while it might not be a monster that wants to pimp your daughter, it could be a boyfriend who says, "Hey, take that picture. Take that picture of your body and send it to me. I promise I won't send it to anybody." Well, guess what phone call I get after the entire football team has seen it? Right. Talking to your kids about smart use of social media, smart use of these devices. Being a mentor. I mean, there's so many wonderful agencies in this town that provide mentoring opportunities. If every citizen in this community who said they want to see a change signed up to be a mentor, whether it was through Boys Club, Girls Inc., Grizzlies, I don't care who you do it through, that would be a game changer. But it really, I think it starts with in the home, knowing what your kids are doing and where they are, and knowing who they're hanging out with and who those people are. And talking to them about being friends to their friends. Because it might not be our sons and daughters, but it might be one of their friends. And having the courage to step up and say something. Every adult in the state of Tennessee, every adult in the state of Tennessee has a duty under the law to report if you suspect a child is being abused. Let me say that again. Every adult in the state of Tennessee, that's every one of you guys, has a duty under the law of the state of Tennessee to report if you suspect that a child is being abused. I don't want you going out and buying trench coats and DNA kits at Walgreens and getting tape recorders and helping me crack cases. I got plenty of great law enforcement officers in town to do that. But what I do want you to do is call the DCS 1-800 hotline. You can make an anonymous call. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And just get that information to them and let them do their thing. Yes?
My wife and I, when we were first married, we actually had 2 children that we brought into our home through the Department of Services and so forth. And we had them for about 6 months. Their father, the reason that they came to us, their father was actually raping his daughter, and then somehow it got out to a neighbor, and that's how they discovered. However, the father went to jail for like 4 or 5 months, and ultimately they took the children away from us, put them right back in the same situation.
Yep.
Father and mother. How in God's name can society allow this sort of thing to happen? I mean, those kids were prospering. They were, matter of fact, one youngest of 2 children at that time was 8, the other one was 10. For, I'd say 4.5 to 5 months, every day, Ricky would give us a call. And we didn't do anything. What do you do?
The focus, DHS at the time that you went through your anguish, now what we call DCS, Department of Children's Services, it is a typical government agency that has got not enough resources to handle the volume of cases that come through the door. And so the main focus, and it 9 cases out of 10, it should be the main focus to reunite families. To not rip children away from their homes if there's an opportunity and a way to reunite and make that a healthy relationship. But unfortunately, that is sometimes the result at too quick a pace, and nobody's ready for that, and it's not what's in the best interest of the children. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I guess without leading, would you make a professional statement or connection between the rise of pornography, the use, whether it's mainstream or more heinous? Would you make a professional connection between the growth in pornography and the rise in some of these sex crimes?
Yes, there has to be. When you look at, there are law enforcement officials in this community, both local, state, and federal, who literally sit in front of computers all day, every day, watching the dots on the map where the pornography is being made, both here in Shelby County and across the country, and then trying to identify those offenders and prosecute those cases is very, very, very hard work. But there are people here in our community that are using our own children to produce and distribute child pornography. The 4 disturbing cases I told you about raping the babies, I think every one of those was videotaped. So that they can sell that, push it out there for other monsters to be able to view and see. But yes, there's got to be.
So even a consumption connection of pornography to
I think so, just because the availability of pornography is so pronounced today. I mean, when we were all growing up, I was in the grocery store with my dad when I was maybe in 6th grade, and I asked him to buy me a copy of Cosmopolitan, and I got a lecture like I will never forget in my entire life. I've never looked at the magazine since. I was so afraid. But I mean, when we were all growing up, it was either Playboy behind the brown jacket, or your brothers would get the Sports Illustrated bikini edition, and that was it. But it's everywhere now. It's on every phone we give our children. It's on every iPad. It's everywhere. Yeah. Yes, sir, Robert.
That maybe, I just listened to the CD recently, and that's when I was
All right, that's good to know. Yep. Yes, sir.
For a textbook case, let's say an 8-year-old girl is raped, and they go through the proper channels, they take her to a lawyer, and then the child makes
Mhm.
makes videos, they do all that. The perpetrator is arrested. How long before that gets to trial?
For it's to trial, year and a half, 2 years? At best?
You do that early.
Yeah, at the earliest. Yeah, which to me is best. If I'm a defense attorney, that's not good. I want it to be much longer. Yeah. There are 10 divisions of criminal court that can hear jury trials. 10 judges. I told you the numbers of the cases that come into the system, so we obviously dispose of most of our business through guilty plea and other such means. Flat out dismissal of the charges or a guilty plea by the defendant. We try about 200 cases a year, 200 jury trials, which is a lot of jury trials. But it's this much business that we have. Because the system would break. You couldn't try every case to a jury. Yeah. Yes, sir, in fact.
Yes, well, first of all, I'd like to thank you and all your staff that is doing this job. God knows we couldn't do it, and we thank you for that because we need You mentioned something about truancy, about kids not going to school. I was at something where you spoke one time before and mentioned the greatest truancy rates by age of children.
Well,
I'd
babies.
like you to share that with the group if you would. It sounded to me, and I'm sure it will them too.
Yeah, it's, so before I became the DA, I headed up our gang and narcotics prosecution unit in the DA's office, and when we talk about truant kids at 201 Poplar, it's typically 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds who are out, well, they're supposed to be at school, and they're out breaking the cars, getting in trouble, whatever. So after I became the DA, I quickly learned that the largest number of truant kids in the Shelby County school systems are the kindergartners and the first graders. It's not the kids that are getting taken to school and walking out back when mom drives away. It's the kids that are never getting taken to school in the first place, either because nobody in the home understands or appreciates the importance of an education, or what I was very quick to learn was oftentimes these families are just trying to survive. They don't have any lights on, they haven't eaten in 3 days, they got one uniform for the kids to share and it's dirty and they're embarrassed, they're sleeping on the floor, they're just trying to live. And getting Johnny to kindergarten is very low on the totem pole of life. I get that. If you got to walk to school and it's raining and you don't have a proper raincoat, proper shoes, the option to stay home all of a sudden sounds a little bit better. So we're working on things. Our office does a great job with the limited resources we have of being in the worst of the worst schools for attendance and trying to cut off this pattern as early as we can, so when those kids start to hit that 2 or 3 day mark, we start meeting with those families and saying, okay, what's going on? What's going on in the home? How can we help you? You need more uniforms? You need, what is it? And sometimes it's just the parents are being knuckleheads. That's easy to fix. And some of the others that are more difficult. Yes, sir?
You talk about the bicycle program.
Yes. I would love to talk about my bicycle program. Shortly after I became DA, I stole an idea from a DA in California to give bikes to kids with perfect attendance. And it is probably one of my favorite days of the whole year. So in my schools where we work on truancy, and there's 13 of them, in addition to focusing on the truancy, we reward at the end of the year every kid who's had perfect attendance with a brand new bike and a brand new helmet. And your tax dollars are not paying for it, don't panic. The wonderful generosity of the Hyde Family Foundation, Huey's, the Rotary Club of East Memphis, and the Highland Tailors. It's a bicycle group, and I know I'm butchering their name, but it's a bike club. Is that High Tailors? Yeah, I don't know, I was trying to make Highland in there. High Tailors. They help make it happen. So they They donate the money, they donate the time. They're out there with us on the Saturday at the Pipkin building when we hand out the bikes, and they help teach the kids how to bike and how to take care of the bike, how to make sure that helmet fits properly. It is one of my favorite days, not only for the smile. The kids don't smile that much because they're embarrassed and I'm fussing over them, and they've got to, pose for pictures with me, and they're 12 years old and 13, and they're just mortified. Which makes me act all the more obnoxious. But their parents and their grandparents are so proud, just so proud of them. I had one grandmother one day almost in tears, and her little twins had gotten the bikes. And she was raising these boys. I didn't ask where mom and dad were, but she's raising these boys, and she said, I made sure we got to school every day. And some days I would go out to my car, and my car didn't start. And we live over a mile from school. And I said, how would you get to school? How would you make sure? She said, we would walk. I was going to make sure they got to school every day so they could get this bike. So it's a great day, and thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk about it. I wish we could do it for the whole school system. Yes, sir, in the back.
Does your department have anything to do with teachers? Because I taught for 46 years, and it seems to me that your department would have something that would begin each school year to address teachers, so teachers could communicate with these kids.
We are in the schools as much as we are asked to be in the schools. I send a letter every year to every parent in the school system advising them about the law on truancy, and basically the tone of the letter is, I just want your kids to go to school. School is the greatest gift we as parents can give to our children. Help me make sure that your kids get that gift, but it also has a piece in there about truancy. But yeah, that letter gets distributed to all the schools. We have spoken to the principals and the teachers on a variety of occasions on how can we help you with the attendance, because the teachers are on the front line. The teachers are the ones seeing it and touching it and feeling it every day. And do you still teach?
I taught for 46 years.
Bless your heart.
What I don't understand is why you would not communicate with schools and say, we're going to come into your school and we would like to talk to the teachers.
Oh, we do. We do. They don't have to let me in. So I can't just, unless I got a search warrant, I can't just go into the school. But we do go where we are invited and where we are asked to be, and we make that known very, very clearly to not only Superintendent Hobson, but the principals and everybody else, that however we can help, let us help you.
The kids are there.
Right.
But it's the teachers that I think influence the kids. And I think that somewhere or another you could have a program where you would visit each school and have a program set up for teachers where you can see it like you did today. You walk into the school and have teachers, study kids as teachers.
Yeah, we do. If we're asked to, we do. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, we do. We'll speak to 2 or 2,000.
One more, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what percentage of victims, maybe immigrants, whether they're documented, undocumented, and the issues they might have coming forward, if they are victims, are being concerned about ICE coming to take them.
Well, if they are victims of a crime, we work very hard to provide them with U visas, if we can, which gives them that protection. So I've got a prosecutor in my office who's from Venezuela, who is, and has actually just become an American citizen and is a member of this wonderful parish. And so he and my Hispanic Victim Witness Coordinator work very hard to make sure victims of crime, in terms of the percentage, I couldn't tell you because quite frankly, we don't care. If you're a victim of a crime in Shelby County, you're a victim of a crime in Shelby County, and we're going to make sure you get justice. And I don't care how you got to be in Shelby County. Yeah.
Let's give Amy a big hand.